Imagine walking through the dusty streets of ancient Athens over 2,000 years ago. The sun is hot, the air smells of olives and clay, and people are bustling around the marketplace, arguing about politics, trading goods, and discussing poetry. But in the middle of all this chaos, there's one man who stands out. He's not rich. He's not dressed like a nobleman. He doesn't carry scrolls or wear fancy robes. In fact, he often walks barefoot, wears a simple tunic, and doesn't seem to care much about appearances. His name is Socrates. And instead of selling goods or seeking fame, he spends his days asking questions, deep, uncomfortable questions that challenge everyone around him to think. Socrates wasn't a writer. He never wrote a single book. Everything we know about him comes from the people who followed him, especially his most famous student, Plato. But Socrates didn't care about being remembered. What he cared about was truth. Real truth. Not the kind you memorize for a test or repeat because someone in power told you it was true. He wanted to understand what it means to live a good life, to be a good person, and to search for wisdom in a world full of noise and false answers. He believed that most people went through life pretending to know things they didn't really understand. They claimed to know what justice is, what courage means, what love is, but when Socrates asked them simple questions, their confidence collapsed. Not because they were stupid, but because they never truly thought about the answers. Socrates made people uncomfortable. He exposed their ignorance, not to embarrass them, but to help them grow. He believed that admitting "I don't know" was the beginning of real wisdom. One of the most powerful ideas Socrates taught was that the unexamined life is not worth living. Let that sink in for a moment. The unexamined life is not worth living. What does that mean? It means that if you go through your days never questioning your actions, never reflecting on your beliefs, never asking why you do what you do, you're just drifting. You're alive, but not fully living. You're reacting, not choosing. For Socrates, real freedom came from self-awareness. It came from thinking deeply, even painfully, about who you are and what kind of life you want to live. Now you might be thinking, okay, but who has time for all that? Life is hard enough. There are bills to pay, jobs to keep, families to care for. Who has time to sit around asking philosophical questions? But Socrates would argue that this is exactly why philosophy matters. Because without it, we become slaves to routine. We chase things without knowing why. We adopt values from society without ever stopping to ask if they make sense. We compare ourselves to others, feel lost, empty, or anxious, and we don't know where those feelings are coming from. Philosophy, for Socrates, was not a luxury. It was a necessity. It was how you cleaned the fog off the mirror and saw yourself clearly. But here's the amazing part. Socrates didn't preach. He didn't lecture. He didn't give answers like a guru or claim to be a wise man. In fact, he insisted that he knew nothing. His method was simple: ask questions. This became known as the Socratic method, a way of exploring truth by asking thoughtful, honest, challenging questions. Instead of giving you fish, Socrates taught you how to fish for answers on your own. He believed that truth already lived inside you. His job was to act like a midwife, helping you give birth to it. Let's take a simple example. Suppose someone said, justice means giving people what they deserve. That sounds fair, right? But Socrates wouldn't stop there. He'd ask, what does the deserver mean? Can we always know what someone truly deserves? And if two people disagree, who gets to decide what justice is? One by one, his questions would pull the idea apart, not to destroy it, but to rebuild it stronger. It's like sharpening a blade. Every strike refines the edge. Every doubt leads to a deeper understanding. And Socrates wasn't afraid to question the powerful. He didn't care if someone was a general, a priest, or a politician. If they claimed to know something, he would engage them in dialogue, gently poking holes in their certainty. This made him both admired and hated. Some saw him as a moral compass, a truth seeker, a champion of reason. Others saw him as a troublemaker, a rebel, a corrupter of the youth. Eventually, the latter group won out. He was put on trial for allegedly corrupting the minds of young Athenians and not believing in the gods of the state. Now, think about that. A man who walked around asking questions was sentenced to death for it. His method wasn't violent. He didn't raise an army. He didn't break laws. He simply asked people to think, and that was enough to terrify those in power. Why? Because unthinking people are easy to control. But people who think deeply? They are dangerous. They question authority. They seek truth, not comfort. And that, to the powerful, is threatening. At his trial, Socrates had a chance to save himself. He could have begged for mercy, flattered the judges, or promised to stay quiet. But he didn't. He stood tall and said, "I would rather die having spoken the truth than live by lying." He was sentenced to drink a poison called hemlock, and even in his final moments, he remained calm, peaceful, almost playful. He wasn't afraid of death because he believed that a good person has nothing to fear. Death, he said, was either a deep sleep with no dreams, or a journey to another place where he could continue asking questions. Either way, he was ready. Now, why does this matter to us today? Why should someone in the 21st century care about a man who died thousands of years ago for asking too many questions? Because Socrates represents something timeless. He represents the courage to live honestly, the bravery to think freely, and the strength to admit when we don't know. In a world full of noise, where everyone's shouting their opinion, where certainty is worshipped, where people follow trends instead of truth, Socrates reminds us to pause, to reflect, to question. Imagine applying Socrates' mindset to your own life. When you're angry, ask, "Why am I angry? Is it justified, or am I reacting from ego?" When you're chasing success, ask, "What does success even mean to me? Is this my definition or someone else's?" When you're feeling lost, ask, "What kind of person do I want to become? What values truly matter to me?" These are not easy questions, but they are essential. They lead to self-understanding. And with self-understanding comes clarity, peace, and purpose. The truth is, we all play roles. We act as workers, parents, partners, citizens. But behind all those roles is something deeper, your soul, your essence, your character. Socrates believed that your soul was the most important thing you have. Not your money, not your reputation, not even your physical body. And just as you wouldn't let your car go without service or your house fall apart, you shouldn't let your soul go untended. You should care for it, nurture it, challenge it, strengthen it. And how do you do that? Through dialogue, through thinking, through honest conversations with yourself and others. That's the Socratic way. Not preaching, not memorizing facts, but asking real questions that lead to real insights. Socrates also taught that it's okay to not have all the answers. In fact, it's better to admit ignorance than to pretend you know. Today, people are often pressured to have quick opinions on everything. But what if we just said, "I don't know. Let me think about it"? That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's Socratic strength. In a society obsessed with speed, Socrates teaches us to slow down. In a world addicted to noise, he shows us the power of silence. In a culture where everyone wants to win arguments, he reminds us that the goal is not to win, but to understand. Philosophy, in his view, is not some academic hobby, it's a way of living. A way of being awake in a world full of sleepwalkers. So maybe the real lesson here isn't about ancient Athens or famous dialogues. Maybe the real lesson is that each of us has a choice. We can drift through life, echoing the voices of others, clinging to unexamined beliefs, or we can wake up. We can think. We can ask better questions. We can seek truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Socrates may be long gone, but his voice still whispers in the mind of every seeker. Not with answers, but with questions. And if you listen closely, you might hear him asking, Who are you? What do you believe? And most importantly, why?